Good morning, and welcome to day 42 of Bible in a Year. We follow together the adventure timeline created by Jeff Cavins as we go through the Bible in 365 days from Genesis to Revelation. My name is Pastor Jay Lutz, and we're going to be going through the period of Egypt and Exodus chapters 24, Leviticus 17 to 18, and Psalm 78. Exodus chapter 24 speaks of the 70 elders, Abihu, Nadab, Aaron, and Moses confirming the covenant with God, and then Moses eventually staying on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Leviticus chapter 17 to 18, the Lord speaks to Moses about sacrifices other than those given to God, especially those made to the goat idol that he says he abhors. And chapter 18 speaks to Moses about what sexual relations are appropriate and what sexual relations are not. And lastly, Psalm 78 is a song of Asaph, a song of confidence, the confidence we have in the Lord our Savior. So let's get into it. Exodus chapter 24. Then he said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance, but Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others must not come near, and the people may not come up with him." When Moses went and told all the people, the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice, "Everything the Lord has said, we will do." Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. He got up early the next morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offering and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship offerings to the Lord. Moses took half the blood and put it in a bowl, and the other half he sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. They responded, "We will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey." Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like pavement made of sapphire, clear as the sky itself. But God did not raise his voice against the leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablet of stone which the law and the commands I have written for their instruction." Then Moses set out with Joshua his aide, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. He said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we come back. Aaron and Hur are with you, and anyone involved in a dispute can go to them." When Moses went up the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the 7th day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Then Moses entered the cloud, and he went up the mountain. And he stayed on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Our second reading comes from Leviticus chapter 17 and 18. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelites and say to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Any Israelite who sacrifices an ox, a lamb, or a goat in the camp or outside of it, instead of bringing it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord in front of the tabernacles of the Lord, that man shall be considered guilty of bloodshed. He has shed blood and must be cut off from his people. This is so the Israelites will bring to the Lord the sacrifices they are now making in the open fields. They must bring them to the priest, that is, to the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and sacrifice them as fellowship offerings. The priest is to sprinkle the blood against the altar of the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and burn the fat as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. They must no longer offer any of their sacrifices to the goat idol, to whom they prostitute themselves. This is to be a lasting ordinance for them and for the generation to come. Say to them, any Israelite or any alien living amongst them who offers a burnt offering and sacrifice and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting, sacrifice it to the Lord, that man must be cut off from his people. Any Israelite or any alien living among them who eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut them off from his people. For the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourself on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. Therefore I say to the Israelites, none of you may eat blood, nor may any alien living among you eat blood. Any Israelite or any alien living among you who hunts any animal or bird that may be eaten must drain out the blood and cover it with earth, because the life of every creature is in its blood. That is why I have said to the Israelites, you must not eat the blood of any creature, because the life of every creature is its blood. Anyone who eats it must be cut off. Anyone, whether native born or alien, who eats anything found dead or torn by wild animals must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and he will be ceremonially unclean till evening. Then he will be clean. But if he does not wash his clothes and bathe himself, he will be held responsible. Chapter 18. The Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You must not do as they do in Egypt, where they used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. Do not follow their practices. You must obey my laws, and be careful to follow my decrees. I am the Lord your God. Keep my decrees and laws, for the man who obeys them will live by them. I am the Lord. No one is to approach anyone close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. Do not dishonor your father by having sexual relations with your mother. She is your mother. Do not have relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with your father's wife. That would dishonor your father. Do not have sexual relations with your sister, either your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether she was born in the same house or elsewhere. Do not have sexual relations with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter. That would dishonor you. Do not have sexual relations with the daughter of your father's wife, born to your father. She is your sister. Do not have sexual relations with your father's sister. She is your father's close relative. Do not have sexual relations with your mother's sister. She is your mother's close relative. Do not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations. She is your aunt. Do not have sexual relations with the daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. Do not have relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with your brother's wife. That would dishonor your brother. Do not have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter. Do not have sexual relations with either her daughter's son's daughter or her daughter's daughter. They are close relatives. That is wickedness. Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife, and have sexual relations with her while your wife is living. Do not approach a woman to have sexual relations during the uncleanness of her monthly period. Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That is detestable. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. A woman must not present herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it. That is a perversion. Do not defile yourself in any of these ways, because this is how the nations that I am going to drive out before you have become defiled. Even the land was defiled, so I punished it for its sin, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you must keep my decrees and my laws. The native born and the aliens living among you must not do any of these detestable things. For all these things are done by the people who lived in the land before you, and the land became defiled. And if you defile the land, it will vomit out, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. Everyone who does any of these detestable things, such a person must be cut off from their people. Keep my requirements, and do not follow any of the detestable customs that were practiced before you came, and do not defile yourself with them. I am the Lord your God. There ends our second reading, and our lastly is our reading, Psalm 78. O my people, hear my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter hidden things from of old. What we have done and things from of old. What we have heard and known, what our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he has done. He decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our forefathers to teach their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born. And they in turn would tell their children. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his decrees, but would keep his commands. They would not be like their forefathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, whose hearts were not loyal to God, whose spirits were not faithful to him. The men of Ephraim, though armed with bows, turned back on the day of battle. They did not keep God's covenant and refused to live by his law. They forgot what he had done, the wonders he has shown them. He did miracles in the sight of the fathers, in the land of Egypt and the region of Zon. He divided the sea and led them through. He made the water stand firm like a wall. He guided them with the cloud by day, and with light from the fire all night. He split the rocks in the desert and gave them water as abundant as the seas. He brought streams out of a rocky crag and made water flow down like rivers. But they continued to sin against him, rebelling in the desert against the Most High. They willfully put God to the test by demanding the food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the desert?" When he struck, the water gushed out, and streams flowed abundantly. But can he also give us food? Can he supply meat for his people? When the Lord heard them, he was very angry. His fire broke out against Jacob, and his wrath rose against Israel. For they did not believe in God or trust in his deliverance. Yet he gave a command to the skies and opened the doors of the heavens. He rained down manna for the people to eat. He gave them the grain of the heavens. Men ate the bread of angels. He sent them all the food they could eat. He let loose the east winds from the heavens and led forth the south wind by his power. He rained down meat on them like dust, flying birds like sand on the seashore. He made them come down into their camps all around their tents. They ate till they had more than enough, for he had given them what they craved. But before they turned from the food they craved, even while it was still in their mouths, God's anger rose against them. He put to death the sturdiest amongst them, cutting down the young men of Israel. In spite of all this, they kept on sinning. In spite of his wonders, they did not believe. So he ended their days in their futility and their years in terror. Whenever God slew them, they would seek him. They eagerly turned to him again. They remembered that God was the rock, that God was the most high, and was their Redeemer. But then they would flatter him with their mouths, lying to him with their tongues. Their hearts were not loyal to him. They were not faithful to his covenant. Yet he was merciful. He forgave their iniquities and did not destroy them. Time after time he restrained his anger and did not stir up his full wrath. He remembered that they were but flesh, a passing breeze that did not return. How often they rebelled against him in the desert and grieved him in the wasteland. Again and again they put God to the test. They vexed the Holy One of Israel. They did not remember his power. The day he redeemed them from the oppressor, the day he displayed his miraculous signs in Egypt, his wonders in the region of Zoan. He turned their rivers into blood. They could not drink from their streams. He sent swarms of flies that devoured them and frogs that devastated them. He gave their crops to the grasshoppers, their produce to the locusts. He destroyed their vines with hail, their sycamore figs with sleet. He gave over their cattle to the hail, the livestock to bolts of lightning. He unleashed against them his hot anger, his wrath and indignation and hostility. A band of destroying angels. He prepared a path for his anger. He did not spare them from death, but gave them over to the plague. He struck down all the firstborns of Egypt, the firstborn of manhood in the tents of Ham. But he brought his people out like a flock. He led them like a sheep through the desert. He guided them safely so they were unafraid. But the sea engulfed their enemies. Thus he brought them out to the borders of his holy land, to the hill country his right hand had taken. He drove out nations before them and allotted their land to them as inheritance. He settled the tribes of Israel in their homes. But they put God to the test and rebelled against the Most High. They did not keep his statutes. Like their fathers, they were disloyal and faithless, and unreliable as a faulty bow. They angered him with their high places. They aroused his jealousy with their idols. When God heard them, he was very angry. He rejected Israel completely. He abandoned the tabernacles of Shiloh, the tent he had set up amongst men. He sent the ark of his might into captivity, his splendor into the hands of the enemy. He gave his people over to the sword. He was very angry with his inheritance. Fire consumed their young men, and their maidens had no wedding songs. Their priests were put to the sword, and the widows would not weep. Then the Lord awoke as from the sleep, and as a man wakes from a stupor of wine. He beat back his enemies. He put them to everlasting shame. Then he rejected the tents of Joseph. He did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. He built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth that he established forever. He chose David his servant and took him from the sheep pen. From tending the sheep, he brought them to be shepherds of his people Jacob, and Israel his inheritance, and David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands, he led them. Here ends the reading. Wow, long reading. Psalm 78. But tells of the voyage and the journey of the people of God. He goes through all the things they did, their faults and everything else. God reminds his people It's not simply that he forgives and forgets. God doesn't forget. It says here he very much knew the sins of the people. He goes through in very detail, reminding the people of what they did back in the day and that they should follow those like King David, who shepherded them with integrity of heart. May we have integrity of heart like our shepherd and King David. And for the shepherd that shepherds us all now, Jesus Christ. We look back at Leviticus, the eating of forbidden, basically don't sacrifice anything that isn't to God. If you're sacrificing to idols, God's not going to have any favor with you, and he's going to leave you out in the dark. Lastly, that this unlawful sexual relations makes it very clear. Don't have sexual relations with anyone within your family or with animals. God abhors those things. And lastly, we see the laws in Exodus 24. They're confirming their covenant with God. This is a beautiful time. And Moses enters the cloud for 40 days and 40 nights. May we also be so close to God that God welcomes us into his divine presence, into being with him, to worship with him, that he is an all-consuming fire. And not in the bad way, in the sense that he is to burn us in hell, but that he consumes us with his fire, that we might be with him and we might feel the presence of his warmth. May you feel the presence of God's warmth this day. May you surround yourself with those who might build you up in the faith. Pray for me as we go through this Bible in year, as I pray for you that you might grow in the fear and wisdom of God. Have a blessed day.